$1 million question. What have you been up to since we last spoke?
Right? Oh man, so much. Man, I don't even know, but I've been seeing clients still, right? So I'm still a psychotherapist. I'm working in New Jersey. One of the biggest things that I've been up to is that I just recently finished a self-care workbook journal for entrepreneurs. The audience is for entrepreneurs. So it is to help them overcome self-doubt.
Congratulations. That is big news. Let me see that. Hold on. Put it back in the camera, please. Let's see that for a couple of seconds.
So I wrote all over it. It's a manuscript.
That's okay.
Yeah.
There you go, everyone. You guys saw it first, okay? Right here.
My rough manuscript that I'm writing over. But yes.
How does it feel to do that?
Oh, it was healing. It was wonderful. It was a therapeutic process for sure. As a therapist, I'm always telling people to journal. People think like, usually I get negative responses from my clients because they're like, oh, I want to write. What am I write? Just write about all my negative thoughts? Right? And I encourage them to, yes, in fact, that's what I want you to write about. But not just that. I think so journaling is anything that you can write out, right? So people assume that journaling is, you have to have a lot to write about, but you really don't. It can be as simple as just writing today in one simple thought. Affirmations. Anything.
I know you mentioned that before when you first spoke, and it's still very, very important to me. And people need to do it. It's one thing to have all these thoughts in your mind because, let's be honest, our minds are a crazy, busy, sometimes dangerous place. And I think if we can put it to paper, we can realize that, oh my goodness, am I thinking that? Right?
Yes, exactly. There's this exercise that's in the journal that's called the stream of consciousness. And it's people who constantly have worry in their mind. They wake up and it's like, oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to make sure the kids are good. Oh, I got to go to the grocery store. And it doesn't seem to stop, right? So there's this technique where when you wake up, you simply sit, you gather your thoughts, and you grab your journal, and everything that comes to your mind, you just write it out. It's a stream of consciousness. It doesn't need to make sense, but it just needs to be written out. And that is a way to help relieve stress, to get some of that stuff out of your head.
Do you find that the reason why it's difficult for some people to do that is because you're vulnerable publicly, meaning on the paper instead of in the secrecy of our mind?
That's good. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, some people are vulnerable, right? Some people don't want, it's like a diary, right? You don't want people to see what your thoughts are, or maybe you're even afraid of your thoughts. But when you get it out there, you have to face the truth, right? That's the healing process. And sometimes you're not always in that mind frame. So I think it's important to document it. So when you go back and look at the things that you wrote and the date, you can say to yourself, man, I was really not in a good place. Or man, I was really happy. What can I do to get that joy back? What was going on in my life? So it makes you do your evaluation of yourself.
I think that is so important because there's some people close to me recently that have been suffering breakdowns. Their mental fitness is not what it was a year ago, much less even 2.5 years ago before all of this, right? So when you mention that, it really touches me in a way that is important because I absolutely agree that we need to not be afraid of being vulnerable. I can understand if someone were to get your journal and you want to chase after them because like, oh no, don't read my my private thoughts, right? Because it could be scary. But where else? If you can't trust the pen and the pad, I guess the next best person would be to trust someone like yourself who can help them along the way. Now that you're still doing that, which is something that I love to hear. How much further along are you now in your journey to help others?
So now I am trained to treat trauma. So I do EMDR therapy. Yay! Yes. So that is a different type of technique, which, what's his name? Prince Harry um, talked about it using EMDR therapy to help him get over the trauma that he had with losing his mom, right? And it's a evidence-based treatment that addresses trauma. It kind of have you deal with those areas that get you to feel the negative impacts in the body, because trauma, the body keeps the score, right? That's a book. It's a really good book called Trauma. The Body Keeps the Score. And so the reason why people say that is because when you live in trauma and you have all this history of things, you don't realize the physical ailments that it puts on your body, because the mind, body, and soul is all connected. And when trauma happens, that impact in the brain is still there. So those triggers, so these things that can trigger you about an event. So for instance, if you got in a car accident, if someone brakes heavy on the brake, you may all of a sudden get really frustrated, irritated, or really angry. And you don't really know where that comes from. So it lashes out in different ways, or, you can't deal with other people driving, and maybe, the significant other is like, what is your problem? Why do you have this road rage, right? And you get so used to living that way that you don't even understand that that's because of the trauma. So now you have a technique that can address that and to get you to live a life, not that you're going to forget, because that's not what EMDR does, but it makes your body and it makes you feel more easy to deal with life and the triggers that you cannot control.
Now that you are trained to do that, where do you want to take that type of treatment into what you're doing right now? Like, where do you go from there when you're treating people on an everyday basis who maybe are a little afraid to relive their traumatic experiences?
So it's not reliving the traumatic experience. So EMDR is a treatment that you have to be ready for, or you can have what we call disassociation, and your disassociation rates may be too much to pursue the treatment. So what that means is sometimes people may like blank out and don't even know that they're no longer here. They disassociate from the world. And that looks like several different things. One is you can be driving and don't even realize that you're driving, right? Like you don't even know how you got home. You're like, oh, I made it home, right? So that sounds dangerous, right? So there's people who live a life like this, like they dissociate from what they're doing. They can go to work and don't even remember but a few things that happen at work, right? So my point in bringing that up is that if someone is dealing with that, then they're not ready for EMDR treatment because it's too much. But if you have some of disassociations is healthy and it's normal, but then when it's like all the time, the person can't stay in here and now, then it becomes an issue. So, there are some people who are not ready for that type of treatment.
And I've come across people that way that you mentioned. You asked them how they got home, and they're like, I just don't remember. And I always, it was always a form of curiosity to me where, because for me, I remember, okay, I turned here, I turned left, I turned right, I was at this speed, where some other people, they can disassociate from it. And I'm guessing, as I recall the people that would tell me this, they had a car accident as a child. Maybe they swerved and missed someone that ended up in a ditch. And that was traumatic because their life may have flashed before their eyes. I remember a time in Canada here, it was snowing weather, and for me, it was a car was sliding left and right, and I had to swerve to avoid them, and I ended up in the ditch. Now, for a period of time, when I would take that road in the snow, my heart would beat faster because I'm remembering how it happened. In that case, that in the example that I gave of myself, Katie, how would, if it was still impacting me in that way, how would I overcome it through the ways that you're familiar with in treating someone like this?
Yeah, so some people have what we call resilience, right? Where um the incident makes an impact, whatever happened makes an impact on them, but they're able to move forward, and over time they get better naturally, meaning like they didn't need outside help. They just dealt with it and kind of did things naturally to help them get better. So for instance, the fact that you got back in your car after the accident and drove helped your body to deal with that incident that occurred. So, when you do EMDR treatment, it's one of those things where you document like the trauma timeline, different times where you felt trauma has impacted you. We create safe spaces. So, for instance, it really is for people who cannot, their resilience is not as high, right? So you are able to feel better and do better over time. So it's for people who just cannot, that they continuously have the heart palpitations when they drive all the time, right? And it's been years, and it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. But I hear resilience in your story. So for people who cannot, live their daily life and have this such impact, when they do the therapy, the creating safe spaces is a place for them to go to calm down. So it's like mindfulness, like in that sense. So we create this safe space. So for instance, like say a child was sexually abused. And you may, as a therapist, I may ask, okay, so we try to create a safe space. And for most kids, they can say, oh, my bedroom is a safe space, right? But if you have trauma and it's sexual abuse and it was of, a loved one, which can be just me talking about this conversation can be triggering for a lot. So I just want to warn you, if you, had sexual abuse, that you might want to ground yourself. But so if that comes up, that child can say something like, I don't know what a safe space is. Like, I can't create. So some people can't create a safe space, right? Like they can't just say, oh yeah, this is my safe space. This is what I think of. So you have to be flexible as a therapist and understanding cultural backgrounds and diversity, that what we assume people can do, they can't. So you just being able to be flexible to work with them and to have them make up one, right? What would your safe space look like? So that way, when they're doing the therapy, they can resort back to it when they need to.
And how important is that safe space?
Oh, it's very important. I think everybody needs something, right? So as we're giving them skills and techniques, the safe space is just a space for them to learn how to relax, that it's okay to resort their minds and to go to that. So most people create beaches, right? The scenery, the water, or hearing the water, what they smell, and you tap it into your five senses. What do you hear? Senses, what do you hear? Do you taste anything? What do you see?
Is it because I do agree. And I have my safe space. I have a safe space in my mind. As you mentioned, it's this beautiful place. It's like for those who like comic books, it's like Superman's cave. You know, it's just this history of everything that's important to me. Everyone around me is loving, and it's just loving, positive memories. And then I have a physical safe space. Um, for those who you're helping create a safe space, is it, and I'm just trying to understand for myself, is it getting the safe space in their mind to become a physical safe space? Or is it okay just having a safe space in their mind to begin with?
Both, both. So the therapy is a way to empower. So people who, due to their trauma, have lacked self-confidence, have lacked that self-esteem, that hopefully when they're done with the process of EMDR, they can walk away a little bit more confident than they were before, right? Because that thing, whatever it was, you ever heard the saying like the monkey's on your back or something like that, right? So that thing that's on you, when you're finished with the process, like you won't have that, right? So that's a sense of relief. It's like when you're trying to breathe, like all your life you've been trying to breathe, but it's been something in the way that you can't breathe freely. So when you get that sense of relief, you can breathe freely. So that's like a confidence within self, right? When you feel good, then you start even looking good, meaning not just physical look good, but meaning like when you feel good, you smile more, right? You have a different type of presence around you. Your whole ambiance, it's just different, right? Everything is just different. It's that energy, your vibrations are lifted.
And it's like what you mentioned earlier about you manifest your trauma throughout your body, right? It's like you have these sometimes visible scars, but you have these non-visible scars on you. But when you have that space and the space that they're creating with people like you, Katie, you move differently, you smile differently. It goes back to when you see someone and you're like, oh, look at you must have won the lottery, or like something must have happened because they're so full of life. And I love seeing, well, I'll preface this. I don't want anyone to suffer, but unfortunately, existence is suffering. But I love seeing people who have suffered something bounce back to tell their story. And for you, Katie, when you see someone who came to you broken and there may be a period of time in, or they may be exiting the therapy session with you, and it's like they're a new person. It's like they're full of energy, full of life, full of smiles. How does that make you feel?
That's what keeps me in it. It's one of those things that's making me want to change and rebrand myself as a therapist. So it's one thing to see clients for different things and people who don't want to do EMDR but prefer just talk therapy. It's fine, but it's like a joy when you can see a client. It's like the butterfly, right? The butterfly is like, it gives that perfect analogy of transformation. And so that's what happens right in front of your eyes. And it's just amazing because it's the feedback that they give you. It is that joy you see. You change like from day one, and working with people for weeks. That is what motivates me. That's that intrinsic motivation, right? It's what's in the inside that make you do what you love. So my intrinsic motivation is that it gives me joy, right? That's that feeling, that emotion that makes me want to do my work. And that's one thing, that I tell anyone. You have to find what motivates you. And there's two different types, the intrinsic and extrinsic. Things on the inside and things outside. And when we talk about things outside, that can be family, because you want to build a legacy of such. It can be, different agencies. But the most profound motivation is that intrinsic, because that can keep you doing things. That helps you find your niche in your career or in your whatever you're doing.
Do you feel that maybe some of us don't have it as balanced as maybe you described?
That we don't have it as balanced? What do you mean?
Yeah. So for example, I have intrinsic motivators, right? Such as speaking to someone like you, for example, motivates me because hearing your story brings me joy. As you can see, I'm smiling, I'm happy, I'm having the time of my life, right? I'm not, well, that's good news. You know what I mean? Like I'm not I'm not waiting for this to be over. I love the experience. And then I have my extrinsic where I have like a job that I do that brings me joy. When I motivate my team, when I'm able to help those through my resources that I've obtained, I have those as well. But there's a balance, I would say, in my life in that regards. But I guess an imbalance would be that I don't have self-love. I don't love me. I go on social media maybe to post certain types of pictures and videos in hopes that I get a certain amount of likes and views. Is that what would be described as an imbalance? Because this is so much more important than what's on the inside.
Are you preaching today? Absolutely. And that's a whole nother subject. I gotta come a couple times to talk about that. But to just touch on it, yeah, that self-care, self-esteem, self-love, it's all tied in, right? And that imbalance that you speak of, especially now when social media is so popular, so big. Let me give you a quick story. So my 7-year-old, he does not have social media. However, mommy has all types of social media, right? And I have to, and based to, marketing and things like that. And so I was shocked because he said, I took a video of them and I put it up on my reel. And he said to me, Mom, how many likes did I get? So the first time I was like, I showed it to him. He had a couple of likes. And so I'm thinking, that's it. Do you know, throughout that whole day, he kept coming to me asking, how many likes did he get? And he was comparing himself to his brother because they both did a little video where they make the faces of the emojis type of thing. And I thought to myself, like, you're 7 years old. How do you know this culture of likes, shares, and who has the most and who has the likes, right? And he doesn't even have a social media account. So that just brought to my attention that this culture that we have created for our children, it does not help with the inside, right? That intrinsic motivation that they naturally need to be able to fulfill their goals in society. So it's almost as if they're driven mainly with extrinsic outside things. They're concerned about outside things and so it is so our responsibility as parents, right? To enforce in them. It's like you have a competition with the world, social media, and, as a parent, you got to enforce these things in them to, I can't even get it out. But yes, I hope I answered your question.
How do you, not in maybe in the, not in the case maybe with your son, but how would we resolve something like that that seems to be so ingrained in the culture that many of us are growing up in today?
Um, well, so conversations in person, right? And one of the things that is very culture sound is the electronics, and that kids. So my kids do have tablets, and they do play on their tablets and things. Um, is that we have to make the culture where there's rules and boundaries for it. There's space for it, but then there's space to have real life people interaction. So that is what I do for my children and for me, because I have to be accountable too, because kids model behavior. They see what's around them and they model behavior. And so I also have to be mindful and make sure that I have my boundaries that I'm checking for when I am using my phone and on my electronics. Even if I am working, it's like they don't understand that line. And so I have to teach it by making sure that I'm spending quality time with my significant others. And that's in relationships too. We can have another topic on that. Healthy relationships, quality time.
I absolutely agree with you. And to be fully transparent, there was a time where I almost got caught up in the likes and the views on Instagram, and Instagram specifically. And I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago that Instagram removed the likes and the views from it, because apparently there was a number of people who were committing suicide as a result. And I spoke to someone who has attempted suicide, and he explained something to me that I didn't know until that time. He said people who are suicidal, to them it's always an option, meaning that it's either, do I get up today? Like, for example, you and I, right? Do I get up today or do I not get up today? It's pretty black and white, right? He told me for him, it's, do I get up today? Do I not get up today? Or do I kill myself? And when he said that, it was shocking to me. And then I started to look back on the likes and views where you have someone, as you mentioned, they don't have maybe the quality time with whomever, and they don't get what they want. So they're like, do I post another video? Do I take down this video, or do I end my life? And that's where it's heartbreaking, because you and I are about in the same age group. We didn't think that way at all. And this is just the generation after us who are thinking this way. So I agree with you. Maybe unintentionally, there's a disconnect because our adulthood has been social media. We didn't have social media like today through our childhood. Whereas this generation that we're raising, they're having it from their infancy. And I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's scary. It's scary. So this morning I got up and I'm looking at the news, and an actress, I don't know if you know Regina King, but she's a African-American female actress, and she's been in like so many movies, especially with us in our age group, right? And her son, her only child, 26-year-old young man, committed suicide. And I thought to myself, wow, like it's becoming, you just said it, like that's an option. That is the option for people who are suicidal, which has been Excuse me. But it almost feels as if it is more. That it's becoming more of the culture. And I think again we have to really give that quality time to our children. And I'm not just saying little kids. When I speak of children, I mean any youth, anyone that's younger than us, anyone actually. We have to just start giving quality time to people, our significant others, our senior citizens, our parents, and we just have to give that quality time, because COVID, I can't help but I know due to my clients and even myself, COVID has had a huge impact on our mental health. That's another topic. So, with that and people being stuck in the house and not knowing if they're going to get the virus, and then if they get the virus, if that's going to mess up their health, whether or not the vaccination is really for them. It's just so much. And then you get the virus after you get vaccinated, and people are, upset about that. And we don't even know what the long-term effects really are from getting this virus. Being quarantined at home, not having support systems. We add all that onto everything else. I mean, that sounds like a lot of anxiety and depression to me.
I'd be surprised when we come out of all this if we didn't see a significant increase in mental health related issues. Because, and I've shared this example with so many other people, when you commit a crime and you go to jail, you're in a house isolated away from society. The worst criminals are isolated by themselves. They go into solitary confinement, or they got a solitary situation. You'll get some people now, as you mentioned, senior citizens. Imagine being 70 and 80 and you can't see your loved ones because of what's going on. You're by yourself alone. Let's be very honest. Those retirement homes, they can be very lonely places. You look forward to seeing your daughter, your son, your grandchildren come and say hi once a week, an hour out of the day, whatever. Some people don't have that. And for the people who are living alone, the same four walls, day after day after day. It's painful to think about. That's probably why you see pet adoption on the rise, because they want at least someone to be at the door waiting for them. And Katie, as we continue forward and you see all of this, where do you take your journey into the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So definitely we have seen an increase with mental health co-occurring. So substance use as well with mental health. So, being stuck in the house, you don't have nothing else. People who had once been in sobriety relapse when we had the big quarantine. That was for sure. Or if they couldn't get their drug that they usually seek, they were going to other drugs. Just a big mess, right? So there's the mental health part of that as well. And then, of course, grieving, right? Grieving things that you wanted to do, you planned for, and it was snatched away from you. So that includes graduations, birthday parties, because you wanted to have a significant, maybe you were going for a significant 40th birthday, and that just happened to be in the COVID time, or weddings, and, grieving those things. For a lot of people, they look forward to things, right? That's a joy that they had. And for that stuff to be snatched away. So it's led me to want to continue to educate communities and talk to them about this stuff. Let's talk about what are other ways you can get that fulfillment. What can we do? And if you're feeling a certain type of way, these are the numbers you can call. Some people don't even know that because a lot of times when you talk about prisoners or just people who are in lower social economic statuses, they don't understand their resources. So a lot of times they're mandated to see people that they really don't want in their lives. So they may get a therapist, but it's because they're mandated. But so I try to teach people that you can actually pick your own therapist. You don't have to be mandated to see whatever the government give you when you go to court. Like you can actually, there's directories where you can find a therapist that fits your needs. So if you want to speak to someone that's similar to you, we are out there, right? So just to continue to educate everyone about mental health, give them the tools. I am so big with journaling. There are so many benefits to journaling. Creativity, inspiration, positivity. You can write affirmations, which is just daily statements to get you to think positive, to change your thinking. You can journal about your negative thoughts, and then when you see them, you can learn how to change them to positive things, right? So journaling has so many benefits. So when you can't get to see someone, that's a quick tool to use. So that's what I have.